Yo, what is going on, people? Finally got a BT10 tier list for you guys. I've been testing out BT10 decks just a little bit over the past couple of weeks just because I'm kind of sick of the set 9 format. So if you're in the same boat as well and you want some set 10 content, well, look no further. I'm just going to be going over my opinions on what I think are going to be the kind of tier 1, tier 1.5, and tier 2-ish decks of the upcoming format. Keep in mind, this is all solely my opinion, so if you disagree with me, please let me know down in the comment sections below. But yeah, guys, let's go ahead and get into it. So starting off with some old favorites, or should I say some very much hated decks. The yellow hybrid as well as blue hybrid for the next format. Now, unfortunately, with both Jet Sylphie as well as Tommy limited to 1, I don't think either of these strategies are going to be doing much of anything. We saw in the set 10 Japanese format that, well, they did actually have 4 Jet Sylphies still, so Yellow Hybrid was still a really popular deck, especially since Crossheart was so dominant, being able to slow down the game a little bit. However, with just 1 Jet Sylphie, I think Yellow Hybrid as a pure deck is probably sitting around the tier 2 position. I don't think it's going to be winning any events anytime soon, but not to say it's a terrible strategy. I still think your yellow tamers are really powerful. Sunrise Buster is still a hell of a card, but Jet Sylphie being a hit to 1 is really unfortunate. I'll be happy to be proven wrong on that. I love the yellow hybrid deck, but I think it's sitting there for now. Blue hybrid in the same position. I don't think with 1 Tommy, this deck isn't really doing anything. Blue Flare can essentially do a lot of the similar things, like being able to freeze Digimon just a little bit more efficiently and without requiring like a tamer or anything. So I think I would put the hybrid decks like right at that position. So moving on, some of the prominent decks in our current set 9 formats, or some of the prominent and plus some of the rogue decks. So starting off with hard set control, yellow purple set control, this deck has proven to be really strong in the OTK meta, and I think it's going to continue to do so, being able to have access to Magnamon, Hellside to loop the recovery, as well as just Chaos Degrade, as well as Flame Hellside. Lots of really powerful option cards. I would probably still put set control at a tier 1 position. We've seen it win events. We've seen it do really well this format, and I think with the introduction of Crossheart, that is a really bad matchup for the set control deck. However, pretty much every other kind of matchup in that format is pretty favorable for you, maybe outside of like Black War Greymon or any sort of War Greymon X strategy. But I'm a firm believer that set control is still really solid choice. Kind of related to that, Three Musketeers is, it does a lot of similar things. We've still got access to a lot of really powerful removal. Your security is still really stacked. However, this deck can spam a lot more with stuff like Bellstar, Nailbone. Got access to Jesmon. Again, Crossheart kind of just mollywops everything, and I wouldn't say necessarily you have a good time against that deck, but against stuff like BloomLord, against the Dark Knight deck, against any of the kind of yellow strategies, being able to fly bullet for 0 cost, put a level 6 on the field is still really strong. So I'd probably still say Three Musketeers as like a 1.5 status. I want to say, just because they don't really have access to recovery, that I wouldn't put it as strong as something like yellow purple set control, but the ability to span the field is still really powerful. Machinedramon, one of my favorite decks that has pretty much ever been put into this game. I just think the gimmick of the deck is so cool, and I really want this deck to be good. But realistically, like, okay, yeah, you can put up a big blocker. All right, you'll block one of their swings with the Crossheart deck. You'll block like maybe like a BloomLord or like one big swing. But a lot of the decks in this format aren't really doing like 4 or 5 checks in one turn. It's more like they can put up Digimon with Rush or swing multiple times. Of course, you still have the prominent decks from last format like Alphamon, Gaio, Grandis and stuff, all of which Machinedramon did not have a good time against, just because the deck is like so slow. And with how fast the game is these days, I would probably just say Machinedramon is sticking in Rogue for now, at least until EX3. I haven't really tested out those cards yet, but guys, I'll be back, I promise you, with some Machinedramon action for EX3. Now, Lilithmon, I probably am going to wait to talk about this. I'll put this with Minervamon for now, just because Lilithmon isn't really played in the BT9 format, but I think once we get access to Minervamon, Minerva Loop becomes a really, really powerful strategy, so I'll kind of wait to talk on her. Mastemon is, again, still a really, really powerful deck. I think more so than most people expected in the BT8 format. At least towards the beginning, not too many people were playing this just because of the lack of consistency, but towards the middle of that format, as well as the BT9 format, kind of lots of people hopped on the Mastemon train, realizing just how powerful the security is, as well as the board control. It feels like you're almost playing kind of like that same yellow-purple security control deck, just because you've got access to the really, really powerful option cards. But then, of course, you are also playing one of the only deck that can interact with Tamers. So being able to loop something like the Lucemon Chaos Mode, I think, is really valuable against the Crosshair deck. So I would probably put this in the same position as the yellow-purple set control deck. So I would probably put Mastemon at like mid to low tier 1. Definitely not going to be overwhelmingly winning any events, I don't think, but I still do think it's a really, really solid pick. Just the amount of removal you have for any of the, new decks is just really, really crazy. Okay, so for Grandis Kuagamon, I think Grandis is still a really scary deck, being able to just hide in your breeding area and then promote a Digimon that can, check 3 cards on a swing and then unsuspend something and then, can suspend one of your opponent's Digimon, has piercing, all of those kind of shenanigans that we've kind of been used to, is still really, really powerful. Now, of course, it does lose to the security bombs that maybe some of the set control decks will play. It loses to Sunrise Buster, that, of course, something like the Crossheart deck can play. But I think if you high roll, this deck is still like really, really solid. We saw it recently towards kind of this end of the BT9 format, where green has just been really, really popular. And as well, like I do think the BloomLord deck is really strong as well, just for the fact that it's very memory efficient and can put up a lot of Digimon. But Grandis is still a really scary OTK deck. I still would put this in a tier 1 category, just because of the fact that, like, okay, a lot of the other decks have a lot of removal, a lot of board control. This deck doesn't really care about that. You just move out, you just do your security punch. High rolling, your best case scenario, you're going to be able to just kill them that turn. In worst case scenario, okay, you lose your stack, time to build a new one. But yeah, Grandis I still think is really strong. And in that vein, let's talk about some of the other BT9 powerhouses. By the way, I don't know why there's 2 Alphamons here. I'm just going to put them together. But Alphamon as a deck is one of the strongest decks, if not arguably like the best deck in the BT9 format. I still think it is going to be really, really powerful, especially for us. Because in the West we do not have the restriction on the Greymon, so we are still playing with 4 Greymon until like further notice. So I still think Alphamon is a really, really solid tier 1 strategy. Just the fact that you can build up into your stack very, very quickly. You've got access to Oryukin, which is just an absolutely unfair card, basically rewinding time, giving you another turn, being able to pop the highest, I think it's highest play cost, the strongest Digimon in your opponent's field, and swing for multiple checks and unsuspending with the Oryu combo. It's just really, really disgusting still. I don't think really anything in BT9 is going to change that. There's not too many things that really counter the fact that you still have 4 Gray. Okay, like Crossheart's only removal is basically Sunrise Buster. Maybe some of the yellow decks could, Venusmon might be annoying for them to deal with. But other than that, I still think Alphamon is really, really powerful. Okay, now Gaiomon. Okay, so I'll try not to be biased about this one. If you know me, you know I love some Black Greymon and some Gaiomon. Probably one of my favorite decks to ever come out of this game. Now, I do think that this deck has a really, really strong matchup against both Blue Flare and Crossheart, 2 very prominent decks I think we're going to see in the BT10 meta, just because being able to control their board and pop their Tamers. Crossheart and Blue Flare are very reliant on having their Taiki and their Kiriha and all their other Tamers that they stick materials underneath and in order to like digicross. So if you're popping a Tamer, not only are you getting rid of their ability to use their Tamer materials as as like Digicross materials, you're also in turn killing their Digicross materials. Because if, for say, like your opponent has like a Taiki with like 2 things underneath it, you pop the Taiki, and then the whole like stack goes to the trash, right? So you're basically not only being able to control their tamers, but then controlling their board, being able to devolve, attack unsuspended, blitzing with the Gaiomon, stuff like that. I think is very, very powerful. So I'm probably going to put this at like a high tier 1.5 because I think it is a very strong counter pick to a couple of the best decks in the format, but I don't necessarily think it's like consistent or fast enough to be able to consistently like win against everything else. Like I don't think you're winning against Grandis, Alpha, Masty, or like okay, yeah, those are strong matchups for you. But if Crossheart gets set up early, if you brick, they can outpace you. Same thing with Blue Flare. Like if they, have a couple of their Kirihas on their tamer on their field, you pop one. Okay, they use the other one. There's still scenarios where like you can get rushed down just because of how fast the metagame is. But I still think it's a really, really solid pick for the next format. All right. So on to the next kind of popular BT9 deck. We got Magnamon or Armor X Antibody, whatever you want to call it. So Magnamon, I still think is a really, really strong deck going into the next format. The unfortunate thing is, again, you don't really have the interactability with like the Crossheart and Blue Flare decks because they usually just keep things in their tamers and then hard play like a Digimon that's got Rush is checking multiple security. But Magnamon X is really good for that, so I can see like your opponent puts up like a Cross 5 that's checking like 2 to 3 cards, and you've got Magnamon X on the field. And you can like redirect the attack, and then being able to have that, and like maybe if you Golden Knight too, so they can't reduce your DP, I think is really, really strong. So I'd probably still put this at like maybe like a low tier. I'd probably put it still up with like all the other tier 1 decks. I don't really think that the tier 1 decks, like all the strong decks from this format, from BT9 format, I don't really think they get too much weaker. Like I still think they're all very, very playable and very strong against some of the other best decks. So anyway, so then we got MetalGarurumon, one of the powerhouses for the BT9 format. A deck that can just attack multiple times, has a lot of draw power, as well as a lot of, the capability to bounce Digimon to hand. Now, the bouncing effect kind of sucks against the Digicross decks because they can kind of just reuse that, like, Digicross Digimon. Like, if you're bouncing, like, a MetalGarurumon or something, they'll just, like, play it again. But the ability to OTK your opponent essentially from 5 security is still really, really powerful. I'd probably still put MetalGarurumon like X up with all the other X antibody decks. Like I don't think, like, aside from the fact that okay, every deck is probably going to be playing security bombs of some sort. Like you're losing to a Sunrise Buster, you're losing to like a Megadeth, you're losing to like Flame Hell Scythe or like a Chaos Degrade. So in that sense, I'd probably say MetalGarurumon has like a lot of bad matchups, but I still think it's like really, really solid. So I don't know. I might put this like high tier 1.5, or I'd probably just keep it like low tier 1. But I still think it's like a really, really solid pick. So okay, so guys, I think okay. So the next deck here is going to be Crossheart. This deck is so absolutely ridiculous. I don't even think like we're ready for this. This deck has basically everything for going for it. It's extremely consistent, has a lot of aggro, lots of searchability, the ability to be able to set up blockers, go for multiple security attacks, removal with Sunrise Buster, memory gains with your tamer, an option for like tech choices for like Fireball to get rid of opponent's floodgates, or maybe something like Blinding Ray, Wyvern's Breath. You have a lot of flexibility because you're playing so many colors, which is why I think the Crossheart engine is so strong. Like this deck being able to like put up a 1-cost Digimon that checks 2 cards, that's got Rush, Piercing, Reboot, or whatever, like this deck is absolutely crazy. Like if you guys didn't think Power Creep was setting in for the Digimon TCG, I like this deck will like prove it. This deck is absolutely crazy. I legitimately do not think, like, aside from Black War Greymon specifically, I don't think you have a single bad matchup. Like Crossheart is that powerful of a deck. I'm literally going to create a new like segment on this this tier list. I don't want to call it tier 0 because it's definitely not tier 0. But I would probably put this like either like very like first on tier 1 or just like in its own category. I think Crossheart is like by far the best deck in this format. Like I don't think it's like even close. There's answers to this deck, yes. Like people, I have been playing Dexmon or Death Xmon and like basically every single strategy to be able to counter this because they play so many tamers and you can devolve their stuff and just play a Death X for like free. But the fact that there's not really many answers to their tamer stacks that they don't really need to commit anything on field, so you can't really play a lot of removal for them. Like they're across 4 dies at the end of attack anyway, so if it dies in security, like it's still material save. Same thing with cross 5, like it still has material save, it's checking multiple cards. So the fact that they can like put up a 1-cost rush Digimon, you'll draw 2 off its effect, draw maybe some more, gain some memory off your tamers. Like the recyclability and the aggressiveness that it has, how fast it goes through its deck is just so crazy. Like not even the slow matchups, like even against set control, okay, I play like I set up all my tamers and then I put like 2 cross 4s down in a single turn, like unsuspend, do the whole combo where you're like unsuspending your tamer and then use those same materials again, and like okay, each time I'm checking 2, okay, if I die, that's whatever, I've got like 6 other Digicross materials I can use in my for the next summon. So it's you're really not committing a whole lot to be able to have like this much like aggression against your opponent's decks. Like I said, the only hard like counter to this I think is something like Black War Greymon, but even like the other OTK decks, if they high roll and like see their stack first, like I'm not saying like there's no chance of any other deck beating Crossheart. That's not true like whatsoever. But I think if you look at both decks, like any 2 decks, comparing like any deck to Crossheart, if you compare their like highest ceiling, if you compare their best hand, I think Crossheart wins hands down. So that's why I would put it at like its own like tier. I think it is just by far like the strongest deck in the format. Okay, so then on to the other kind of decks. So Blue Flare, I talked about a little bit. I think this is an easy tier 1. This deck is really, really crazy. Metal Greymon's a hell of a card. Being able to put down a 3-cost rush Digimon that can freeze on play is just a little bit unfair. Basically doing blue hybrid things there. So as far as all the other decks go, I'm just going to kind of go through these a little bit quickly just to talk about the new decks a little bit more. Justimon, you get some new support there. Sorry guys, I still think it's a very, very rogue. I think it's Critical Arm that we get in BT10. Don't think it's really doing anything. D-Reaper, the decks are just like way too fast now. I would maybe put this in like 1.5. It's seen a lot of success in this format. Like I definitely think it's like up here with like all the X antibody Digimon, but I think it's just gonna see like so little play. I'd probably like, you can maybe say like low tier 1. I'd probably just put this 1.5. It hard loses to like any of the like any of the Digicross decks, as well as like even like the OTK decks if they just draw good. And then, okay, so the yellow card, I'm going to put Sakuyamon and Venusmon kind of together. I honestly cannot say too much so far. I would say as individual cards, these cards are like very, very good. Like by themselves, I think they're really good. I can't really say too much because I haven't tested them in the context of like maybe a yellow hybrid deck or like a security control deck. So I think it would be probably fair to put these in like 1.5, like right underneath our yellow-purple security control here, just because I think these cards specifically can be played in like either like a yellow-purple build or like a yellow hybrid build. But like I said, I don't really want to say anything because I haven't really tested these out too much. But just based off the cards like by themselves, I think they're really, really powerful. The Bagra Army deck. This deck is actually really cool. Their tamer is like very, very powerful, but that can also be a crutch because they're very heavily reliant on it. So if you don't see the tamer, it can be very tough. I would probably put this in like a 1.5, maybe tier 2-ish. I'll probably put this tier 2, just because I don't think I've seen it do really anything in Japan, but the support's really solid actually. Like they've got some cool cards. The Blastmon's really cool. Tachymon's really solid. But of course not really doing anything in comparison to all the other decks. The Gaiomon deck, again, can't say too much, haven't really tested this out. I don't think it's bad. I actually don't really remember what the level 5 does, but you've got access to like all the level 4 Gaiomon evolution, so I would assume it's just like a champion rush deck. So I'd probably put this at like a tier 2. I don't think I'm gonna see it do too much, but it can be like a cool locals deck. Imperial Dramon, this deck is still really powerful. I'd probably put it tier 1 just because it's doing the same thing as like that it's been doing since set 8, just OTKing, bottom decking Digimon is still really powerful. Again, if it high rolls, it's just like up there with all the other really aggressive decks, potentially even beating out like Crossheart or Blue Flare if they're just like not drawing good. D-Brigade, fan favorite here. D-Brigade I still think is pretty roguish. I don't think we get any direct support in 1.5. When we get to EX3, then we'll talk. But I'd probably still put this in like a low 1.5, maybe tier 2-ish. Like I've seen it do some stuff in BT9, but like I don't think it's really doing anything versus a Blue Flare, Crossheart, or anything like that. RagnaLoardmon, oh my god, this deck is really fun. I've been messing around with RagnaLord, like the starter deck cards and stuff. I think the support is like very solid. Like I like, as much as people like to meme this deck, and like how the card is like kind of like a win condition, like a win more card, but this deck is like really solid. Like you got a lot of protection from card effects. The RagnaLord level 6s, I think like one of them makes it so that you get a delicate plan and security, and then the other makes it so that it's just like unaffected by card effects. So if you get to RagnaLord, like this could be a win condition and potentially a spicy tech in like maybe like a Black War Greymon list, or just any other, like maybe Jesmon or something, I don't know. But I think RagnaLord is like actually pretty solid. Like I think this can steal games. I'd put this like a 1.5. Maybe that's hopium, but like guys, I'm telling you, RagnaLord's actually like really cracked. Like the support is like actually pretty solid. BloomLord, oh man, BloomLord is doing some unfair things. This deck, it reminds me of like Seriesmon and like the Nidhogg decks of like BT's like 1.5 and 1. And 4 and stuff. It's like the old school green where like it wasn't about OTKing, it was just about going tall, and then you would get advantage off of like your level 6s and the fact that like you're mainly gaining like tempo and like board presence, and you're doing all of this for a very low memory cost. Like being able to go BloomLord, you like evolve a champion, Digizorb into an ultimate, evolve a BloomLord, suspend something, gain 2 memory, unsuspend, is like really crazy. Like this card is very strong. I think it's probably going to be one of the most prominent decks. I probably put it like high tier 1 along with the like Crossheart and the Blue Flare decks. I think this deck is very powerful, just because of how memory efficient it is and how many crazy things it's doing. Okay, so now we've come back to the two goth mommies here, the Minervamon as well as Lilithmon. I'll put these two together just because I think the deck plays both of them, but the deck is like Minerva Loop is kind of like the trademark, right? So Minervamon is a very cracked card. Like it reminds me again of like the things you were doing with Lilith and like set 5 and 6 and 7, just like before we got Eismon Limited, and you know, just because now we can't really play Lilith Loop too well, just because of the fact that every deck is OTKing, so you still need a little bit of time to set up. But Minerva Loop does some really unfair things, being able to bring back level 5s like Cerberusmon, gain a bunch of memory because they get their on play effect, and they go into like another Minervamon and do like all these crazy combos. I would say that Minerva Loop is for sure like tier 1 deck. So I'm gonna put this. I'll put these two together, but I would say Minerva is for sure like this deck is crazy. It does some awesome plays, and regardless of like how competitively viable it's going to be, I think we're going to see a lot of people, like a lot of purple players, return to this, because so far in the set 9 format, basically the only purple deck people have been playing have been like 3 Musketeers and like Mastemon, none of which really feel like the old school like purple kind of like draw 20 cards and trash a bunch and gain memory off your jack rate and stuff. So I'm gonna put that in tier 1 just because I think it's a really crazy combo potential. And lastly, we got Dark Knight and Jesmon. Dark Knight I'm gonna put in probably like low tier 1. I think it's a really solid deck. Maybe not even low tier 1. I don't know where I'd put this, but I'd say it's like really solid for sure. Like again, this is the one I haven't tested out too much, but just based off what I've seen on like Japanese gameplay and stuff, Dark Knightmon seems really good. And then lastly, we got Jesmon. GX here. Jesmon is a crazy card. Like, with all the support they've been getting out of the starter deck, and then now BT10 and stuff, being able to utilize GX as a card is just so crazy. The new Jesmon with Blitz is really strong. The new Savior Huck is really powerful as well. I probably put this in a tier 1 slot just because it's a very, very aggressive deck. It's similar to kind of like the kind of Crossheart or like maybe like the Grain Kuaga / OTK strategy, where you're not really committing too much to the board aside from like your Sistermons or your Huckmon searchers, but then you're building up in the back, and once you move out, you like swing with a Jesmon, play a Sistermon off of him, play a Sistermon off the Savior, like go into GX or something, and like, you know, there's a lot of potential for this deck, especially with the inclusion of like the newer support. It's pretty crazy. So anyways, guys, that's where I'd put the Jesmon, and that is going to do it for the BT10 cross encounter tier list. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. Like I said, this is all based off of my opinion and just the testing I've done with the new decks, but I would say the decks to watch out for next format are definitely going to be Crossheart, Blue Flare, BloomLord, and all the other new kind of Digicross decks, just because that mechanic is like so fundamentally broken. But anyways, guys, that's going to do it for this one. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.